Hello everyone, my name is Shubhajit and today we will be discussing about the use callback hook in React. So this hook is mainly used for performance optimization. So one more hook which we have covered previously is the use memo hook. So the use memo hook is mainly used in cases where the output of the use memo will be stored in a variable. Okay, and inside the use memo whatever we have specified that will return a value and that value is cached. In this case, in case of a use callback hook, what we does, we actually store functions. As you all know that functions are also stored in JavaScript. Functions are stored as reference types. Okay, so you should understand that this use callback which I have used here, this actually takes a function and a dependency array. If you have seen the use memo video or the use effect video, you will actually relate to this structure. I will let you know that what we are actually trying to achieve with the help of use callback hook. So inside the use callback, the first parameter you see is as the function. This is the callback function. So basically the use callback hook is caching this whole function reference. What do I mean by that? So this handle submit, this handle submit is actually equal to this function. Okay, now let's say the first time render happens and the handle submit is assigned the value of this whole function. Now the second time render happens and there is no change in the product type. Then what the use callback will do, the use callback will actually use the same function which is cached inside this handle submit. It will not reassign this function, it will not reassign this function again to handle submit. As I have told that functions in JavaScript are stored as references, so as many number of times this component re-renders, if we don't take the help of this use callback hook, every time the handle submit will be assigned to the function whose reference is different. The definition is the same, this definition only, but the reference will be different. I want to highlight that what it actually causes on the UI and why we are using the use callback hook here. So due to this, let me comment this out and uncomment the basic implementation. So here we have a handle submit which is assigned to a function, this one. If you properly see that this function is actually this function inside the use callback only. So here we haven't wrapped it inside the use callback and it's a basic assigning of a function to a const variable. Okay, now let me tell you what the UI is. So in the on the UI we have these three buttons. So these three buttons will be setting the product type. What is the product type? The product type is a state variable. Now if you don't know about the use state hook, I have covered it previously. Please go and watch that video before coming here, else you will not be able to understand this. I will put it in the description. You can have a look. So let's continue. Product type is a state variable, and whenever there is a change in the product type, this whole component will be re-rendered. Okay, that you should understand. So you can see on click of these buttons, I am setting the product type. So on click of the first button, setting the product type to all, setting the product type to men for the second button, and setting the product type to women for the third button click. So in these scenarios, what we are doing, we are mainly changing the product type state variable. So whenever the product type state variable changes, this whole component re-renders, as I told. And when this component re-renders, this handle submit function will actually get a new reference every time the component is re-rendered. You got it? So every time the component is re-rendered, this handle submit will get a new reference for the function. So it means that on every re-render, handle submits reference is different. The definition might be the same, but the reference in which this definition or this function is present is different now. So the value or the reference value of handle submit now is different on every re-render. So when it happens, the shipping form component which we are calling and we are passing the handle submit, that will be different every time. Okay, and due to that the shipping form will be called and it will be running. Okay, so we want to avoid the reference change of handle submit so that the shipping form will not be called again and again even if the handle submit actually hasn't changed. Okay, so for that we actually wrap that inside the use callback hook. Just to show you what actually is happening, let me refresh this and clear this out. Okay, so if you see, when I am pressing men, woman, shipping form is called. That is fine. Because whenever I am clicking on men and women, what is happening if you see? Whenever I am clicking on these three buttons, any of these three buttons, the product type is changing. And whenever the product type is changing, this handle submits reference should change because the product type is changing. So this function definition also changes because it is using the product type here, if you see. So that is perfect. But if you see, I have some more things here, which is the count state variable and the handle click method. If you have seen my previous videos on hooks, you might have encountered these two things. And relating to that, relating to that, I will also have a button which will actually utilize this count variable. So basically what this button does, whenever the button is clicked, it will increment the present count variable, which is a state variable, by 1. So initially the count variable is 0, and whenever the button is pressed, the handle click will be triggered and it will set the count to count plus 1. Now you see that this count variable is not at all associated with the handle submit button. Okay, so whenever this count button is clicked, the whole UI will be rendered, but it should ideally not be calling this shipping form because the handle submit doesn't have to do anything with this count, right? But if you see, let me clear this. On pressing the count also, the shipping form is called. That is, it is going inside this shipping form component and it is console logging this. So why is this happening? So as I have explained you earlier, that on every re-render of this component, handle submit will be getting a new value, new reference value. So due to that only, this shipping form component, whenever count is changed, even when this handle submit is changing and the shipping form is called. Okay, so that's why we are wrapping it inside use callback. I will show you one more interesting thing now. Okay, now we are using the use callback hook. That is fine. Now let's do the same things again. On pressing men, on pressing woman, shipping form is called. That is fine. That is pretty much obvious because the product type is changing. Now, as we have used the use callback hook, on pressing the button which actually triggers the change of the count state variable should not actually call the shopping form, right? But it is calling. Why is this happening? One more mystery now. Okay, so this is the default behavior of React, that whenever the parent component re-renders, so we are changing the count state variable, right? So this whole component re-renders. Whenever this whole component re-renders, we know that we have used the use callback for handle submit. Now we know that the handle submit has the same reference value as the previous render, but the default behavior of React is whenever a parent component, this whole parent component renders, the child component will also render and it will not see that the props which it is passing is changing or not. It changes or doesn't changes, it will re-render the shipping form component, and that's why this console log you are able to see on the screen. So that is the mystery about it. Now React has given a memo API which actually uh, takes us out of this situation, which actually resolves the situation. What it does, if we wrap the shipping form component with a memo API, what React is providing, what memo does is it sees that okay, from the previous render and this render, are the props changing? Are the value of the props changing? If they are not changing, then please don't call the shipping form component again. Whatever UI you have previously painted on the UI or rendered on the UI, please show the same UI. Don't call it again. So that is the sole purpose of memo. That if the props are not changing, please don't call me. Okay. So if you see here, whenever we click this button, which actually triggers the change of the count state variable, which doesn't have to do anything with this handle submit function. In that case, the reference value of handle submit doesn't change, and thus the shipping form component should not be called. But due to the default behavior of React, the child components are called even when there are no change in props. So due to that, we have used this memo wrapper around the component so that this will not be called when the props are not changing. So handle submit is not changing, and why it is not changing? Because we have used the use callback. It caches the reference value of the functions. It gives the same uh, reference from the previous render if there is no change in product type. If there is a change in product type, then it will create a new reference and send it back to handle submit. But if there are no change in product type, then it will use the previous version of handle submit only, and thus we achieve the caching as well as not calling the child component if it is not required. Let us go to the demo and see how it looks like. Let me refresh this one. Okay. Now if I do click on men and women, shopping form will be called. But if I click on this, you are able to see that nope, nothing is happening here. Right. So that is all about it. I hope you have understood the video, the whole explanation, and if you have any doubts, please do let me know in the comment section. I will be happy to help you guys. Thanks a lot.